Hey y'all, Lila with Miss Kiss Kreations. Welcome back to my channel. Today's tumbler tutorial, I'm going to show you how I created this rainbow alcohol link tumbler in honor of Autism Awareness Month. And this tutorial in Tumbler is made for all of my beginner crafters and tumbler creators. This is super easy to create. I know I say that every time, but y'all just wait, and I try to condense this as short as a video as I can so you guys can just get on it and just craft your little hearts away. Like always, all of my materials will be listed in my description below, including some direct links and coupon codes. So you'll obviously be seeing my rainbow tumbler in this tutorial, but I also used the same technique and I made this beautiful blue tumbler that I just have to keep for myself. I will list all of the inks that I used for this tumbler in my description below, and I will have a YouTube short on this, and I also have a TikTok reel and an Instagram and Facebook reel on this one. So I know it's going to be a lot shorter, but the same technique for this rainbow tumbler is used for this blue tumbler. And say hello to Mr. Onyx. He decided to be super curious and just check out what mommy was doing and showing y'all today. I had to feature him, it's been too long. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this tutorial. So I started with a 20-ounce stainless steel tumbler, again stainless steel, not glass. And what I do with all my tumblers for my prepping process is I sand my tumbler down with an 180 grit sanding block, and then I wipe the tumbler down with 91% alcohol. Make sure it is at least 91% alcohol, and then I spray painted my tumbler. It didn't matter my spray paint job. You can see there's some splotches in there. As long as it's spray painted, and you can use any finished spray paint for this. You can use gloss, matte, or satin. I waited for that to dry, and then I mixed my epoxy. We are using alcohol inks, so you'll see that I am taking all the caps off my alcohol inks and I'm placing them near the tumbler just to set up my station. I'm making sure to do this just to prep myself, just to make this tumbler process a little easier. And you'll notice I am working with gloves, and I also have my respirator mask to protect me from the epoxy fumes as well. So again, this is a 20-ounce tumbler. I have more epoxy in my cup that I will be adding to this tumbler, but I added about 30 milliliters of epoxy to this tumbler. You don't want this epoxy to be too thin because those alcohol inks are going to spread and not really flow on the tumbler, but you don't want to be thick enough where it's really just bulky and wavy and bumpy. So again, I used about 30 milliliters of epoxy, that's 15 mLs part A and 15 mLs part B, totaling 30 mLs of epoxy for my 20-ounce tumbler. The reason why I didn't put too much epoxy on this to make it too thick is because you'll see my technique that I use after I apply those alcohol inks to the tumbler. So you don't really necessarily need this tumbler's epoxy to be really thick like you typically would alcohol ink tumblers, because I'm going to do something a little bit differently once I add those inks to the tumbler. And of course, with being autism awareness, I wanted to do my rainbow effect or use the rainbow colors. So I started from the red, yellow, orange, green, blue, purple, violets, and I placed those in order along my tumbler just so I knew to grab the next color to make my life a little easier, because sometimes I'm watching TV or I'm getting distracted or I'm stuck in my thoughts and I just start grabbing any color that my hand grabs next without even thinking about it. So once you apply all your epoxy on your tumbler, you're going to take your heat gun, and this is my heat gun I purchased from CCDIY, and I always use this setting high, and I pop some bubbles and then I let it cool down for a couple moments before I add my first color to my tumbler. The first color of the rainbow is red, so I'm adding that red to the bottom, and you'll see that I'm trying to space out with my hand. That's what I did. There's 7 colors, so I'm trying to make it as even as possible. And we all know it's not going to turn out the way that it's going to turn out in your head. It's not going to be perfectly symmetrical or have those colors spaced out perfectly as you like it. So just keep that in mind. I tried really hard to do that, but it just didn't turn out the way I wanted to. And also keep in mind that whenever you add your darker colors, it's going to spread more and more quickly than your lighter colors. So you'll see at the end, my yellow got dissolved by the green in like seconds. Only because the green is placed next to a lighter color. So I used a lot of green not thinking about that, and it just overwhelmed the yellow and you can barely see the yellow at the end. And that's why I chose to use a yellow decal. So all I'm doing is I'm adding those colors. I'm trying to make that white tumbler go away. And you'll see I'm doing a great job with it. All these colors are added. And once I add my color inks, that's when I'm going to add my white over. So the only color that you need for this tumbler type is white. So it's not mixative, it's not any other alcohol ink contraption or whatever they come up with alcohol inks. I don't know. You just need to have a white alcohol ink, and I love using Blanco from Piñata. I personally love Piñata brand. I always use the white because I just like the consistency, and it's always worked for me. It's always come through. So you'll see that I'm adding those white specks on the tumbler, and you'll see that it does look like cells and it does not look pretty, but guys, trust the process. This tumbler is going to turn out gorgeous. So once your little heart is happy with adding the whites to the tumbler, you're going to do something a little different here. It's okay. Just again, trust the process. You're first going to add your heat. Again, I'm using my high setting with my heat gun, and you're going to see the colors kind of move a little bit. And instead of just letting them move, you're going to take your gloved finger and you're going to start at the bottom, and you're going to make Z's or little squiggly lines inside of that epoxy. You're not going to lift your hand at all. You're just going to make those squiggly Z motion lines, and as you're making those left and right motions, you're going to start moving up towards the tumbler. So when those colors mix, you'll see that they're just like mixing nicely, and it just has a beautiful mixture, and you'll see those little waves starting to work. So this isn't as swirly, and I should say as like a normal alcohol ink tumbler. These swirls are a little bit more tighter, I guess. So that's why you're making those little Z's. And even before like it's spinning on the tumbler, you'll see how gorgeous this is already looking. Just adding my finger on there and just lifting up, it already looks great in my opinion. Once you've added your little Z's or swirlies, you're going to take your heat gun again, and you're going to heat it up some, and that's going to allow that mixture to really mix and really do its thing and have that epoxy move around, and that's it. You're going to remove the heat. You're going to allow this to spin on the cup turner for about 4 hours. You're going to then turn off your cup turner and let this tumbler air dry or air cure for another 20 hours before adding your decal. And look how gorgeous this is. My personal favorite part is that purple blue area. I just love the blues because it just reminds me of ocean. And I know with any colors you use, this tumbler is going to look gorgeous. So I'll let this spin on my cup turner, and I'll see y'all in about 24 hours. Wow, wasn't that a quick 24 hours? But look how beautiful this tumbler turns out. So what I do after every epoxy, I take my X-Acto knife and I X-Acto knife the rim of my tumbler. I'm removing any of that excess epoxy that may have been placed or cured on the tumbler. This is easier to do after every epoxy step instead of doing this one time at the end. Once I'm finished with X-Acto knifing my tumbler, I then take my sanding block, a 180 grit sanding block, and I sand the rim of the tumbler. And I'm just sanding enough to expose this tiniest bit of stainless steel so I can have that nice sealed rim at the end. And then I take my 91% alcohol and I wipe the rim of the tumbler with my 91% alcohol. Now you'll notice once you wipe your tumbler with your 91% alcohol, you're going to see some alcohol inks come from your tumbler. So just keep that in mind, but just wipe it away just to clean your tumbler before we move on to this next step of adding the decal. The decal I decided to add was Be Kind. I did find this on my Cricut Design Space. I do pay the extra $10 a month to have the unlimited access or whatever they call it now. And all I did was I offset this. So I wanted a very thin offset, meaning I wanted that white to pop behind that yellow to really complement that yellow and really so you can see that yellow Be Kind on the tumbler. The offset I used was a 0.30 for this, and I will have that posted in my description and on the screen somewhere. And you'll see that I'm just adding that offset to the tumbler by placing that white on the mat so that white doesn't lift when I go to place that yellow decal over the white. And then I'm taking my tumbler and I'm just placing that Be Kind. I wanted it long enough so we can start from the top and end at the bottom, and applying it very easily on the tumbler like you see, and just peeling that transfer tape right away, and I have such a cute tumbler already before it's even sealed. And if you guys have been following me for a long time, you guys know that I always use my quick coat. This is a urethane sealer from CCDIY, and I apply a very little amount of this quick coat to my vinyls. This just helps seal that vinyl to the tumbler so you don't have to worry about lifting onto epoxy over with your final coats. And here I am just doing the same thing with that blue tumbler, because why not? I needed to just add a decal to that. I chose Stronger Than the Storm, and of course this is also found on my Cricut Design Space, adding this right over that tumbler from top to bottom. Guys, I fell in love with this tumbler so much. This was such a beautiful tumbler and I cannot wait to make more. And just a side note, if you do not want to add your decal to your tumbler and you just want your art to speak for itself, after you add your inks to your tumbler, all you have to do is do the sanding, the X-Acto knife, and just add another layer of epoxy over your tumbler so you can seal in those inks, and then your tumbler is ready to go. But I wanted to add my decals to these tumblers, and then once you have your decals to the tumblers, we are going to add our final coats of epoxy. I did 2 coats of epoxy, so I did this coat, I let this cure, and then I did my final coat. I just wanted to make sure that my alcohol inks were really sealed and that my decal was really sealed and it wasn't like bumping or like poking up from the epoxy. And one thing I wanted to mention is that I did not sand my entire tumbler after I added the inks. If you do have a bumpy tumbler, or if there are some areas that needs to be sanded, go ahead and sand your tumbler, wipe it down with 91% alcohol, add your decals, and then add your final coats of epoxy. The coats of epoxy that I added was 12 mLs of epoxy total. That's 6 mLs part A and 6 mLs part B, totaling 12 mLs of epoxy. Again, I added my first coat, I let that spin, I let that epoxy cure, and then I added that second coat, that final seal, to really lock in that entire design and that tumbler before it was ready to go. And once that second coat of epoxy was cured, I took my X-Acto knife for the final time and I X-Acto knifed the rim of the tumbler just to remove any of that excess epoxy from the rim. I washed my tumbler out with my Dawn dish soap with a clean paper towel. I added my lid to my tumbler and my tumbler was ready to go. Let me show y'all guys. And here is the final tumbler. This tumbler was so fun to make. I love the message that it brings and it says, and I love how vibrant these colors are on these tumblers. This was just so fun to make, and the color options you have, the style options you have with these tumblers are just out of this world. So just having that gloved hand and just making those little small squiggly lines, to me, I personally think it looks a little bit differently than just laying those inks on the tumbler and letting that epoxy move around. But maybe that's just me and I just get just overly excited about my art, and you can tell in my voice probably that I'm just too excited. I just love creating greatness and just cuteness. So let me show y'all the other one. I just have to keep this blue tumbler, guys. I have to. Maybe I'll make some more, maybe I'll have it posted on my website, but this was just too gorgeous to give up. I know you guys can definitely relate. It's such a struggle. Just add it to my shelf of tumblers. And I thank y'all so much for watching. I thank y'all for all of the support. And remember, you can always follow me on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram for more tumbler tips and tricks and videos. And here's Onyx again. I just wanted to show him twice in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching my tutorial, and I'll see y'all next time.